This is the case of George John Hanson, also known by the name John Fitzgerald Hanson. He stands as a convicted murderer facing the ultimate penalty under the law, the death penalty. His conviction originated in Tulsa County, located within the state of Oklahoma. The primary crime for which he received this sentence was a brutal sequence of events in 1999. This included carjacking, kidnapping, and ultimately, the murder of an elderly woman. The victim of this crime was Mary Bowles, a 77-year-old retired banker. Hanson was not alone in these actions. He had an accomplice, identified as Victor Cornell Miller. Miller was also involved in another distinct murder. This second victim was Gerald Max Thurman, who had the misfortune of being a witness to the initial crime. Beyond these state convictions, Hanson carried additional legal status. He was already serving a life sentence for federal convictions. These federal charges included bank robbery and other related offenses. The sequence of events began on August 31, 1999. The location of the initial abduction was the parking lot of the Tulsa Promenade Mall. The method employed was the carjacking of Mary Bowles' vehicle. The stated purpose behind this carjacking was not merely the theft of the car itself. It was intended to facilitate the commission of further robberies. During the abduction, roles were assigned between the two perpetrators. Miller took the role of driving the stolen vehicle. Hanson, meanwhile, held Mary Bowles at gunpoint, controlling the captive. The journey concluded at a secluded dirt pit located near the town of Owasso. It was at this isolated location that Mary Bowles was murdered. The method of her death was shooting. George John Hanson was identified as the individual who fired the shots, discharging a semi-automatic pistol 4 to 6 times. Tragically, there was a witness to the abduction and the events at the pit. This witness was Gerald Max Thurman, the owner of the dirt pit property. His presence became a critical and fatal complication for the perpetrators. Gerald Thurman was also murdered at the scene. The method of his death was shooting, carried out by Victor Cornell Miller. Miller used a revolver, firing 4 times. The explicit reason for Thurman's murder was to silence him. He was a direct witness to the abduction and the presence of the perpetrators with Mary Bowles. The bodies were discovered later. Mary Bowles' body was found approximately a week after the crime. Gerald Thurman was found sooner, though critically injured. He succumbed to his wounds and died 2 weeks later in the hospital. Give a like and subscribe. Leave a comment. The apprehension of the suspects occurred shortly after the murders. Hanson and Miller were arrested on September 9, 1999. Their arrest followed the commission of another crime, the robbery of a federal credit union. Evidence quickly linked them to the earlier murders. Fingerprints belonging to the perpetrators were found on Mary Bowles' car. Furthermore, the discovery of the murder weapons, a .38 revolver and a 9mm pistol, provided crucial forensic links. Due to the nature of the charges and the evidence, Hanson and Miller were tried separately. This allowed the prosecution to present the case against each individual independently. George John Hanson's first trial commenced in May 2001. The jury found him guilty of both murders, the murder of Mary Bowles and the murder of Gerald Max Thurman. Following the guilty verdicts, sentencing occurred in May 2001. For the murder of Mary Bowles, Hanson received the death sentence. For the murder of Gerald Max Thurman, he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Victor Cornell Miller's trial took place later in April 2002. He was also found guilty of both murders. The jury's verdict held him accountable for the deaths of both Mary Bowles and Gerald Max Thurman. Miller's initial sentencing in April 2002 mirrored Hanson's in part. He received the death sentence for the murder of Mary Bowles. For the murder of Gerald Max Thurman, Miller was sentenced to life without parole. The legal process for death penalty cases involves extensive appeals. George John Hanson's first appeal reached the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals in 2003. This appeal resulted in a significant outcome regarding his sentence. The Court of Criminal Appeals vacated or overturned Hanson's death sentence for the murder of Mary Bowles. The case was then remanded, meaning sent back to the lower court specifically for a resentencing phase. Hanson's resentencing trial took place in January 2006. Despite the previous vacating of the sentence, the outcome was the same. He was again sentenced to death for the murder of Mary Bowles. Following this second death sentence, further appeals were pursued. the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals upheld the death sentence in subsequent reviews in 2009 and again in 2021. Federal courts also reviewed the case. The 10th Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the sentence in 2015. The case even reached the highest court in the land. The U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear his appeal in 2016, effectively upholding the death sentence at the federal level. Despite facing a state death sentence, Hanson's legal status included federal convictions. He was serving a life sentence in federal prison for these separate federal crimes. This placed him under the jurisdiction of the Federal Bureau of Prisons. He was incarcerated at USP Pollock, a high-security federal penitentiary in Louisiana. This federal imprisonment status would later become a critical factor in the scheduling of his execution. Meanwhile, Victor Miller's appeals followed a different path. Miller's death sentences were eventually overturned or commuted through his own appellate process. Ultimately, he was resentenced to life without parole. This occurred through court decisions in 2013 and 2015, removing him from death row. With state and federal appeals exhausted for Hanson, the process moved towards scheduling and execution. The Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals set the first execution date. This date was scheduled for December 15, 2022. However, this scheduled execution did not proceed as planned. The reason for the delay stemmed from Hanson's federal imprisonment. Federal authorities operating under the Biden administration at the time refused to transfer Hanson from federal prison in Louisiana to Oklahoma state custody. Oklahoma authorities responded to this refusal. The Oklahoma Attorney General initiated legal action, suing the Federal Bureau of Prisons to compel the transfer. A U.S. district judge subsequently denied Oklahoma's request for the transfer. This judicial decision effectively stayed or halted the execution indefinitely. The state was unable to carry out the sentence without physical custody of the condemned inmate. The legal standoff persisted. A significant change occurred in federal leadership in January 2025. Donald Trump succeeded Joe Biden as the President of the United States. This change in administration brought a shift in policy regarding the transfer. The new U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi took a different stance. She directed federal prison authorities to comply with Oklahoma's request and transfer George John Hanson. This directive cleared the path for the state to take custody. The transfer of Hanson from USP Pollock to Oklahoma State Penitentiary occurred in March 2025. His presence in state custody allowed the execution process to resume. The legal and logistical barrier had been removed. With George John Hanson now in state custody, the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals proceeded to set a new execution date. On April 1, 2025, the court scheduled the execution for June 12, 2025. This date brought the case closer to a potential resolution after decades of legal proceedings. A lengthy process has had a profound impact on the victims' families. Jake Thurman, the son of murder victim Gerald Thurman, publicly expressed the long wait for justice. He spoke of the emotional toll the case has taken over the years. Despite the pain, Jake Thurman also conveyed a message of forgiveness. His perspective highlights the complex human dimensions intertwined with the legal and penal processes. The final legal step available to Hanson was the clemency process. A clemency hearing was formally held on May 7, 2025. This hearing provided an opportunity for arguments to be presented regarding whether the death sentence should be commuted to life imprisonment. The Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board reviewed the case. Following the hearing, the Pardon and Parole Board rendered its decision. The board voted 3-2 to deny clemency for George John Hanson. This decision represented the final administrative hurdle in the state's process. The denial of clemency by the board carries significant weight. It leaves the execution date previously set by the court firmly in place. Barring unforeseen legal intervention, the execution is scheduled to proceed on June 12, 2025.